Well, good afternoon. I'm David Lenoir, and I'm honored to be a candidate for Shelby County Mayor. It's good to be back with y'all again this afternoon, so thanks for having me.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for coming back. So why do you want to be our next county mayor?
I want to be our next county mayor because we've made incredible progress over these last 8 years, and I think it's important that we have someone that has proven experience as a problem solver. When I was elected 8 years ago as the banker for the county, we had high unemployment. The county's finances weren't in very good shape. We owed a lot of people a lot of money. And fortunately, in these last 8 years, we've made tremendous progress. Shelby County owes fewer people. Our books, our finances are stronger, and that's a good thing. What that translates into is the economy has improved on a local level. Unemployment is down. There's more than $10 billion of investment that's going on in our community right now. And so I have a background and I have a proven track record as a problem solver. To continue the progress that we made, the problem that we need to address is education. I believe education is the game changer when it comes to addressing some of the challenges, or many of the challenges in our community. Whether it's workforce development, whether it's crime, whether it's poverty, I believe we can all look back to education as the challenge. So I'm proud of the fact in the last, as part of this progress, we've increased our funding for education. We've had the resources on the county to provide education or funding for pre-K, and we need to continue the funding for pre-K. And that's why education is a priority of mine as the next county mayor. And I get excited as I'm out in the community and talk about this education liaison, somebody that works day to day and reports to the mayor. I'm not talking about increasing the size of government. I'm talking about the priorities of the county mayor, to put money where your mouth is.
Well, say a little bit more about that. Sure. Because obviously a lot of education, especially public education, is controlled at the state and federal level.
Right.
And there's a lot of control locally with the school board and
right.
the superintendent and the county commission, which sets the budget.
Right.
So what can the county mayor do to help
great
education?
Great question. One, I mean, just make it a priority as you're out in the community. You have a pulpit or a platform. Number two, I mean, typically the way it works is the school administration comes over once a year, presents their budget, and I think the county needs to have ongoing day-to-day dialogue with our school systems, and so this connectivity between our education community and the business community in terms of workforce and job development. I was having lunch with a group of small business owners just today, that they were talking about an internship and an apprenticeship program that they make available. And I think it's some of that connectivity. So on one hand, it's the accountability. Before we go and ask our taxpayers to pay more, I think we need to have ongoing dialogue with our school systems in terms of the needs of our school system, and just not this once a year visit with our school systems. But then the other piece of that I can bring to the table is this connectivity with the business community of apprenticeship. So that's what I get excited about. Is I don't believe our young people, because I know it wasn't the case for me and probably wasn't the case for you. You didn't go to school so that you could get a certificate that you could hang on the wall that said I graduated from whatever the high school or college or technical college that you graduated from. You want to go to school so that you have the skills and knowledge for career and to provide for your family. So the education liaison provides a platform.
This is a position you would create.
I would take an existing position within the mayor's administration and I would transform it. Case in point, in the trustee's office, a big priority of mine has been financial education. So I took an existing position within the trustee's office and transformed it, re-engineered it so that the focuses of that particular individual would be focused on financial education. Because at the same time in the trustee's office, what we did is we reduced our position count 25%. So I think in terms of leadership and priorities and focus, I have the background to lead, But back to the education liaison, because as I'm out in the community talking about it, it gets so much positive feedback. I mean, when we've increased our funding and we provided more money towards our school system, but unfortunately the result is that 90% of our high school graduates are not college or career ready. It's frustrating. It's frustrating for taxpayers. And so, to put together with this education liaison an education task force, to have the education community, teachers, superintendents, the policymakers, the think tanks around a table much like this, and theoretically lock the door and say, what is it that we have to do to create a great education system here in Shelby County? And then not only develop the game plan, but then go implement the game plan. And again, that would be the work of this education liaison and this task force.
You've talked about using education to fight poverty and blight.
Right.
How would you use the economic development tools that we have at our disposal in this region to also deal with those issues, particularly in North and South Memphis?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I think it has to do with workforce development. I mean, when you look at the tools like pilots and incentives, and there's a new tool that I think will get a lot of discussion here and more discussion as we move forward, as the opportunity zones that was in some of the recently passed tax legislation that says there are incentives for ones to open a business in some of the more harder hit areas. So I think it needs to be a focus and a priority, whether it's workforce development. How can we take some of the harder hit areas? It bothers me that as the schools have consolidated and there's empty school buildings, that we have vacant and abandoned school buildings. I think we can reach out to our business community, our career and technical college. I'm sure we'll talk about transportation today, but how can we take and repurpose some of those vacant and abandoned buildings for workforce development?
You've already set it up on the tee there that in terms of transit, there are a lot of folks who complain that you can't get to jobs from, say, Fraser to the FedEx hub, that it becomes a onerous trip just to get to a job.
Right.
How would you propose dealing with that, particularly with MATA?
Well, yeah, there is no doubt we need a more mobile-friendly community. One of the young men that I developed a relationship with 15 years ago when I was a mentor down at coaching football, I helped him get a job actually over by the airport and experienced the same predicament, the same problem. He lived in the North Memphis area and had to take 2 bus stops to get from where he lived down to his job. Unfortunately, it caused him to be late, and he lost his job as part of that process. So there is no doubt we need a more mobile-friendly community. What I've said is that I would love to work with the City of Memphis mayor. I mean, MATA is a City of Memphis program, an initiative. The board is appointed by the City of Memphis. I've sat down with leadership at MATA. I know they're going through and working through re-optimizing and looking at routes. I mean, I think we've all passed buses where buses have been empty, and so it's one of those that makes you scratch your head. But if Mayor Strickland, and I'm the county mayor, if he picks up the phone and calls me and says, hey, let's get together and talk about how we could make it a more mobile-friendly community, I'd be happy to have that discussion. I think there's tools and resources that may be available to the county that aren't available to the city, whether it's grants or funding or the philanthropic community or all the above. But I guess my concern is that this whole double taxation issue, and I think before we ask taxpayers to pay for additional or increased funding as it relates to MATA, I think it's just one of those things we have to sit down and look at, and I think that's what you do as a leader: is you evaluate where you are, you look at the alternatives that are before you, and then you make a decision to move forward.
You talk about double taxation, city taxpayers and county taxpayers sort of having to pay for the same thing at the same time. So a city resident will pay twice in effect.
Yeah.
For transportation, for example.
Right.
But isn't that also true with some other things like public safety? Aren't we paying double? Aren't city residents paying double for a lot of services right now?
Well, I mean, yes, part of the funding for like our law enforcement, our sheriff, does come from the city taxpayers as well. And that's why I'm glad to hear that the sheriff is making more resources available into the city of Memphis. I mean, there's no doubt crime needs to be a priority for all of us, regardless of where we live. And so, but to answer your question, yes, there are cases where.
I bring that up because you've talked a lot on the stump about tax rates,
right,
and about the fact that property taxes in Shelby County are higher than anywhere in the state. They're too high. They discourage investment in this community. They discourage people from moving into this community, and maybe they help people move out of this community. Is that one of the ways in which we can deal with that issue, is to deal with this sort of double government we have?
Yeah, no, I think, and what I'm trying to communicate out is that, yes, when my understanding from the business community is when you combine the city of Memphis tax rate with the Shelby County tax rate, right, that it is the highest tax rate in the state. And so to me, it's a thing of stewardship, and I guess going back to my private sector days, a return on investment. My feeling was back in 2010, and I heard it when I was on the campaign trail then, that many had voted with their taillights. I don't think folks mind paying more in taxes as long as they feel like they're getting a bang for their buck. And when you have high crime, when you have 90% of our high school students are not college and career ready, it becomes a value proposition. You say, why am I paying so much in property taxes and not seeing it in terms of a reduction in crime and increased educational outcomes, higher graduation rates? And so I think that's my heart and more where I'm coming from as it relates to tax rates, because at the same time we have to acknowledge from a competitive environment, DeSoto County, Marshall County is a different tax structure. Fayette County, with the growth of 385, is actually not that far away, and it has low tax rates over in Fayette and Tipton County. So, I mean, the reality is each of our households, we all deal with limited resources. I mean, we individually make personal decisions of how we want to spend our monies. And so there are people who say, you know what, if I move outside of Memphis and Shelby County, I will not pay as much in taxes. And I think that's certainly a reason that some of the business community has left Shelby and moved into some of the surrounding areas. And so anything we can do to lower the cost of doing business, if you will, in Shelby County, and providing a return on the investment, reducing the crime, and increasing education, makes it more of a value proposition. My hope is that more families will want to plant and grow here, and we can turn the tables on population loss. Yes.
Yeah, you recently stirred up a lot of chatter about the NAACP debate because you had issues with Wendy Thomas being the moderator. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people who are asking this question as well. Wow, David Lenoir can't face Wendy Thomas as the moderator.
Right.
In this debate, how is he going to solve problems in the county? How is he going to face these big problems in the county if he can't face this one person who's a debate moderator? How do you respond to that?
Yeah, it had nothing to do with Wendy Thomas as the moderator. I have no problems with Wendy Thomas. What it had to do is I believe that Wendy Thomas had disqualified herself as the moderator. And so I reached out when I discovered what I feel like was the disqualification. I reached out to Miss Vicki Terry at the NAACP on the Saturday before and expressed my concern to Vicki and asked her if she would be willing to change the moderator. When I did not hear a response back, I was put in a position where I had to make a decision. I have no problem sitting down with Wendy and would welcome the opportunity.
But you saying that you didn't want to. You're saying that they had to still had to change the moderator before you would agree to participate, and the moderator was Wendy. Wendy stepped down. They didn't take her down. They were going to proceed whether you came or not. So you still had a problem. You had a problem with Wendy then. No,
I didn't have a problem. I reached out and I documented the fact to the NAACP, to Miss Terry, that I believe Miss Thomas had disqualified herself as a moderator based on a public post and things she had made after being selected as the moderator. And so my request was, because she had disqualified herself, my request is that they replace the moderator. And so...
So what did she say in her public post that you believe disqualified her from being the moderator? She wasn't debating you, she was moderating, you know.
Well, first of all,
What did she say?
I feel like that a moderator should be fair and objective.
Okay, okay,
Do you agree with that?
yeah.
Okay. And so after she was selected to be the moderator, she had gone to social media and asked for questions. One of the questions that she received, and I apologize to your viewing audience, but was, is David Lenoir an asshole? I felt like it was an inappropriate question. Her response to that question was not, that's an inappropriate question. Her response was, let me find an alternative way to ask that question. I believe that disqualified her. I believe that. I shared that with Ms. Terry, and she said she would get with the NAACP and get back with me. When I did not hear back from her, I had to make a decision, and I said, I'm willing to do the debate, and I'm willing to do Mr. Harris and I have had many debates all across this county, and I'm willing to do the debate with the NAACP at the National Civil Rights. I just felt like they needed to change the moderator because she had disqualified herself.
While we're on uncomfortable subjects.
That's not uncomfortable for me. I mean, I can.
I understand.
Yeah.
Your opponents, including Corey Strong, who's the head of the Democratic Party locally, has brought up another issue. Before you were trustee, you were in the private sector.
Mm-hmm.
We talked a lot about that. One of the things you did was start a management fund called Centurion Investment Partners.
Right.
And part of your pitch back then, I guess, was that your investment fund was screened out companies that you felt were in opposition to Christian values, including, you said at the time, companies that were sort of caught up in what you call the gay and lesbian agenda, also companies that were somehow connected to abortions, even companies that were sort of connected to casinos or alcohol and tobacco,
right,
on a lesser level. Can you talk about why you did that and how you feel about that now? As a public servant, you're going to have to be the mayor, and you were the trustee of the entire county.
Well,
everybody in this county.
Yeah, no,
can you represent everybody when you feel that way?
Well, I am the trustee of everybody, and I have no tolerance for discrimination based on race, gender, or sexual orientation. And I think anybody that looks at my track record and my time in office these last 8 years, I've demonstrated that, whether it's the composition of my administration and my office, or whether it's the composition and the community of initiatives that we rolled out. You know, when I came in 8 years ago, we had many taxpayers who were behind on their taxes. We rolled out an initiative called Project Home. It was a payment plan assistance program. We have helped thousands of taxpayers stay in their home. It was open and inclusive to everybody, regardless of race, gender, or sexual orientation. We launched a Bank on Memphis initiative to help those who are not associated with the banking community to open up bank accounts so they don't go to payday lenders and check cashers. That was open and inclusive. It had nothing to do with race, gender, or sexual orientation. We have an On My Own initiative for high school students to help high school students know what it's like to live life on their own. So I believe I have demonstrated in my 8 years as your county's banker that I have no tolerance for discrimination based on race, gender, or sexual orientation.
Looking back, do you regret having started that fund?
No, I don't regret having started that fund. That fund was created for a specific community, the church-based community and religious organizations, and was intended to provide them a way to invest their money based on their beliefs.
Let's get back to public safety. There have been several issues that have come up recently regarding public safety, and the next mayor is going to have to deal with these issues. The first one is the juvenile court system,
sure,
which is now under federal oversight.
Right.
The county has asked twice for the federal oversight to end. Do you favor ending federal oversight? Why or why not?
Well, I mean, there's no doubt there is crime is a big issue within our community, and particularly juvenile crime. It should be a concern and is a concern. I know for me, and it should be for every one of us. So in terms of things that we can do in terms of intervention and diversion, I think we need to do. I sat through a number of community events and the symposium that was hosted at the University of Memphis on public safety, and one of the outcomes, Dr. Althea Stewart and others, was this Juvenile Assessment Center. I think the Juvenile Assessment Center is a great step forward in terms of keeping people, our young people in particular, obviously, out of the juvenile system. So I think the first step in terms of addressing juvenile crime is to not have juveniles in the system to begin with. So the Juvenile Assessment Center, I think, is a great tool and something that I would support as county mayor. And also workforce development. I mean, one of the initiatives that we rolled out in the trustee's office was a mindset of an entrepreneur initiative. We would go into Hope Academy at the juvenile court, which is the school inside juvenile court, and we would teach an entrepreneurial mindset. The thought is that the young people that are in the juvenile courts are creative, they're salespeople, they're smart, they understand how to get things done. It's just unfortunately they've used those entrepreneurial characteristics and they've headed down the wrong path. So what we want to do is love on them, encourage them, and let them know that the characteristics that they have are entrepreneurial. We just need to work with them to get them back on the right path. You know, as it relates to the Department of Justice, you know, I would have to rely on our sheriff. I would have to rely on our juvenile court judge and those experts. I think one of the leadership qualities is about having the right people in the room, listening to the discussion, and making a decision based on their feedback and input.
Another issue that came up this week with juvenile court and juvenile justice was the apparent need for a new juvenile detention center in Shelby County. They've talked about it this week at the county commission, talking about spending $50 million plus on a new juvenile detention and possibly a new juvenile prison center. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, again, I mean, I would have to rely on the experts. I mean, Judge Michael and others over in the juvenile system talk to those that work in that particular community, meaning the juvenile justice community, and rely on them. Let me say this: I do not believe, when it comes to public safety and crime, that we can hire enough law enforcement officials or build enough bigger jails. I believe that the way to address public safety and crime is through the lens of education and through the lens of economic development. I think that one of the best crime prevention tools we have is job creation. So if we can focus on education and provide a great education system from pre-K all the way up through Moortech and Southwest and Lemoyne-Owen and Rhodes and CBU and University of Memphis, our four-year colleges. If we can focus on creating a great education system and at the same time work our tails off to bring in more economic development into our community, I think it'll be a huge deterrent as it comes to crime.
Let's go back to your personal story. And
okay.
You, of course, have been an entrepreneur as well as a banker. How has that helped you as a public official, and what advantage or what edge does it give you as a public official?
Well, one, I mean, I would bucket a lot of those as just as a problem solver. I mean, to be a successful entrepreneur, to be successful in business, it's about solving someone else's problem. And so I think that's a key characteristic. Number two, having worn that hat, I understand what it's like to make tough decisions. I've started businesses, I've shut down businesses, I've hired employees, I've fired employees, and there are decisions that have to be made on a day-to-day basis. But at the same time, I also understand how hard people work to earn a living. My wife is a small business owner, and so when you look at this prioritization of how we spend our money, we have to keep in mind that our income is someone else's expense. Our income is someone else's expense. I mean, you were paid because somebody chose to take the paper and advertise in the paper. That was an expense that someone else made the decision. And so as it relates to the county and being a good steward of taxpayer resources, I think it's extremely important that you have that background and that mindset that Someone has made a conscious decision to live in Shelby County. Someone has made a conscious decision to open their business in Shelby County. So we need to make sure that we give the best bang for the buck because they have made that decision. And as it relates to population loss and getting folks back into Memphis and Shelby County, again, I think this economic hurdle or the tax rate has been one of the issues that has pushed people away. Not that it's too high, it's just that the results historically have not been there. So how can we improve education so that more people graduate that are college and career ready? How do we have more business here so that my 23 and my 19-year-old want to live here and know that they have a great job opportunity here? So I think that background experience is invaluable.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Are you from Memphis? Did you grow up here? What your parents do?
Yeah, I would love to tell you that I did. I was born in just outside of Nashville.
I'll forgive you.
Yeah, well,
you came to the right.
But I did, and I did when I was 6 months old. So while I'd love to just say I was born and raised in Shelby County, yeah, all but 6 months.
That qualifies as almost a native.
Yeah. Well, but it's technically not correct, and I want to be honest. So. My mom graduated from Central. She was a cheerleader over there. When I was digging through things in the attic, she had a letter, the H, and I thought, Mom, you went to Central, why is it not a C? And she said, oh, well, son, that was the high school. And I think the letter still today is an H. My dad was part of the first graduating class at Overton High School. Went to Memphis State and played football over there. He studied accounting. My parents, I'm the middle of three. I have an older brother and a younger sister. And grew up in Memphis, and then my parents moved out to Countrywood when I was 5. And grew up in an entrepreneurial home. My parents started a business when I was 5.
What kind of business?
I was in the banking and financial services business, doing the tax returns for retirement plans, profit sharing, and 401k. So when I go out and talk about recruit, retain, and reward, that was really a lot of what we talked about around the dinner table. Like many small businesses, was not it was a tough sledding early on, just getting started. I can remember as a young man, as an athlete, my parents could not afford cleats for me to go play soccer when I was in the second grade. So, I know many in our community have far worse challenges than I grew up with, but just in terms of reflecting back, grew that business, and my family sold that business to a national bank 18 years ago, National Bank of Commerce. And it was really around that time that I began the quest to get more involved in public service. As the article said, and I appreciate the article that was written by Ryan, how could I use the gifts and abilities that God had given me to help others? So having played college football, I thought that was a great opportunity to get more involved. And then having a background personally with a degree in accounting and having a particular skill set of helping people have more money in their pocket in terms of helping them manage their money, I began providing financial education out into the community with various nonprofits.
Describe for me what you would say is the defining moment that made you decide you wanted to run for county mayor. What experience did you have? What epiphany, if any, that made you decide you wanted to do this?
I don't know that it was any one. I have this 3-day rule because I think too many times folks make decisions too quickly, kind of out of emotion. But I mean, certainly the death of my first cousin who was killed in 9/11 that Ryan talked about in the story, that was a defining moment for me personally. He was a college athlete. He played football at Duke. Met a young lady from New York while he was at Duke. They moved up there, and he was in the second tower when it got hit. So he was the oldest grandson on my father's side of the family.
Wow! And
so that was definitely a defining moment for me. But then, as I guess an economic researcher, an investment researcher, when I saw the financial direction of our nation, that our nation was $17 trillion in debt, and that my kids and my hoped to one day have grandkids would be born into debt. I thought, you know what, I've been successful in the financial services industry. I have a background in accounting. Let me throw my hat in the ring and see if I can't help solve this problem on a local level as it relates to Shelby County's debt. So $1.6 billion when I came in, we've reduced that down. But really, it was a kind of a series of events and my own reflection of the gifts and abilities that I had, and how could I help others with those gifts and abilities along those lines that I volunteered as a football coach at the same time.
Any student, and when you were coaching football, held any kind of inspiration or had a story that made you want to do this too? Did you have a student who inspired you?
Well, I mean, as far as football. I still do. I stay in touch with those young men. I've helped some of those young men. When we talk about crime, some of the nonviolent crimes that are out, driving with a revoked or suspended license, I just hit my head against the wall and think, how can we lock up people and put people in jail based on crimes such as those? I think about a young man that at the age of 18.
So you agree with that decision about the court costs?
As far as expungement
the court costs,
absolutely.
It's unconstitutional for people to.
Yes, you would find me in this attempt to solve problems is we have to eliminate or reduce hurdles, and it is clearly a barrier for many. We're working. I won't complete the work as the trustee, but we've been working with the Annie Casey Foundation on trying to address fines and fees. I mean, some of these financial challenges that exist for so many in our community and are barriers to quality of life and just life in general. I was knocking on doors in the Orange Mound community about 1.5 years ago, promoting a free tax preparation program in partnership with VITA and United Way. And a young man that I coached but hollered out, said, "Coach," and when I turned around, it was a young man named Terry Lewis. Long story short, Terry and I had lunch recently, and Terry wants to improve his quality of life. He's working in a maintenance department for a large organization. It's not what he loves, but it's a job. It pays the bills. So through our reconnection, he loves working on cars. The long story short, he's now made application over into the Mortec Auto Mechanics program. And here's the challenge. I think it's important for the conversation is he has to make a commitment to that program and sit in class. Meanwhile, he has bills that are hanging over his head. So in terms of how do we reach out to this opportunity youth, these 44,000 that are like Terry, who are between the ages of 16 and let's say 30 or 35, we have to address this problem of things like the Excel Academy that I supported, of helping adults finish and get a high school diploma, but also workforce development. And I think it's one of those things that I was talking to an employer just the other day about a nonprofit or a foundation that can help our young people transition from where they are now vocationally to really a long-term career. Because to get in a Mortec program or Southwest, there's sacrifices that have to be made, but at the same time, there's bills that continue to come due. And so how do you fill that void so that someone can transition from where they are now to a more meaningful career? And so as far as examples, I can think of many, but those are just, yeah.
Well, the question for you is, what has it been like for you the last several weeks in terms of the campaign, and what have you learned about yourself?
It's been extremely exciting in the last several weeks of the campaign. I've had the honor and privilege of serving countywide for the last 8 years. So in terms of familiarity with the landscape, familiarity with the people that live here in Shelby County, it is familiar territory. At the same time, I also realize I'm running for an office that is higher profile, and the stakes are higher as a county mayor as opposed to county trustee. So it has been an absolute joy to continue to stay engaged in the community. I'm a listener. I'm not a public debate kind of person in terms of social media. I've sat down with leaders after the incident of the NAACP on a one-on-one and a face-to-face basis to let them know what transpired and what took place. So it's been an exciting few weeks, and I'm excited about the fact that early voting has started, and it's kind of time to really focus on the finish line of August 2nd.
You mentioned that running for mayor is a little different than running for county trustee.
It is.
So this is at least your third campaign. What have you learned running for such a high-profile position that you hadn't learned before about yourself?
I keep coming back to it is truly an honor and a privilege to serve the people of Shelby County. I'm a big guy and I'm an emotional guy, but I'll just say that it just reminds me that we do represent the entire community. The community has a diverse set of needs, and for me, that's part of where that problem solving kicks in. Is how do we create an environment where every child in Shelby County has the opportunity for a great education? I mean, how can we work together? Who are the right people that we can get in the room? And out of that, I mean, how can we get the right people in the room so that everybody in Shelby County has the opportunity for a great job? Those are the issues that I wrestle with, and those are the problems that I want to solve as county mayor, because I truly believe a byproduct of that is that we will have a safer neighborhoods, and we will have a growing economy here in Shelby County.
You know, one of the more interesting things I think about Shelby County is, and you know this, that it's not only Memphis, one of the poorest big cities in the country, but it's also one of the most generous.
Right.
How do you reconcile that? How does that, it doesn't seem to add up. How can a place that's so generous and so giving also be so poor still? Yeah,
I mean, it is certainly one of those, difficult conundrums, if you will. I mean, I would like to think that generosity stays locally, but at the same time, I'm not sure all that generosity stays locally. I'm sure there's people who give back to their colleges, and so. But yeah, I mean, I think in terms of accountability and return on investment, it does beg the question of how effective is the generosity. And look, not to turn it away. I know there's many who are asking these questions, the philanthropic community who've made sizable investments to try to address the education issue, and only to see that it's very hard to move the dial. And so again, I mean, back to this education liaison and the task force, I want to have the philanthropic community at the table. I want to have the teachers and the education community, because it is so vital that we get this right.
Your opponent talks a lot about his experience as a legislator dealing with lots of issues locally and statewide. You haven't had a similar experience in public office, but you've had a different experience being an administrator for 8 years.
Right.
How has being trustee of the county, being an administrator for 8 years, prepared you to be the mayor? Sure.
Well, I mean, the legislative bodies, whether it's local or state or national, they are the lawmakers. It's my job as an administrator and executive to implement what they have legislated, both the good and bad, and think about the good consequences and the unintended consequences. But the role of the county mayor is an administrative or executive position, and as it relates to my role as the trustee, all of the revenue for Shelby County comes through my office. So I'm very familiar with the finances of Shelby County. I mean, we have a $1.3 billion budget. $800 million of that comes through property tax. The next biggest portion is sales tax, which comes through my office. So I'm very aware of the financial aspects of Shelby County. From a legislative perspective, we've worked on blight and financial education and other initiatives out of the trustee's office. I had the honor of leading the Tennessee Trustees Association as their president several years ago. We worked on blight legislation. So, understanding, one, how to craft appropriate legislation. It's not me telling you what we need, it's me listening to you on what needs to be done. We worked with Judge Potter in Environmental Court on Neighborhood Preservation Act. I mean, that was listening to you, the people of Shelby County, to say, here's what needs to be addressed. Crafting the legislation, going up in consensus building up in Nashville. And so, we've been able to do that both on from a blight perspective with the Neighborhood Preservation Act and some of the redemption legislation that we passed. I think it's been a great experience. I mean, the mayor is the administrative function of Shelby County, and it takes listening to the taxpayers and then crafting the legislation and moving forward.
If you're elected mayor, what would success look like 4 years down the road? What are 3 things you could probably, looking ahead, that you want to point to as these things changed, these things improved?
Yeah, I would say the fact that more of our students graduate that are college or career ready. While we talk about the unemployment rate from a macro perspective, that the unemployment rate in Shelby County, I believe, is as low, I won't say as it's ever been, but it's as low as it has been in a long time. Unfortunately, there is this population of people, this opportunity youth that are highly unemployed. I would love to see the unemployment rate for that particular segment of our community, for the unemployment rate to drop dramatically. And then I guess also just the economic output of Shelby County. I would love for our economic output as a community to improve, because that would be one of the sort of the bellwether barometers that things, at least at a high level, are improving. And last but not least, I mean, it's near and dear to my heart, the work that we've done the last 8 years to address poverty. I would love to see the poverty rate decrease over the next 4 years.
Do you think it's important for Shelby County to grow more than it has?
Grow in what way?
Population.
I think it is, because again, I think it's a sign of we're doing things right. I had some folks who were in Nashville just recently for the National Association of Counties meeting. I mean, Nashville was 100 people a day, and so you say,
you're moving in,
right? Moving into Nashville, and so to have something like that, I mean, is I believe an indicator that you're doing something right. So, what can we do, or what can I do as an elected official to create an environment where you want to plant and grow as a family, and where you want to plant and grow as a business? Human capital and financial capital is mobile. And we talked about it in terms of people had voted with their taillights. So what is it can we do to create an environment where folks want to move here and want to make Memphis and Shelby County their choice?
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.